Today on Doomed! Have you noticed a group of people wearing Hawaiian shirts at your local Black Lives Matter protests? Yeah, the gun-toting ones, not the guys, maybe there's some guys chilling at your local Black Lives Matter protest in Hawaiian shirts. But they're not wearing guns or body armor. We're talking the gun-toting ones. Yeah, then you ran into the Boogaloo Boys. They're a brand new movement on the far right, and we're going to talk about them on today's episode of Doomed. Who are they? Where did they come from? Why the hell are they wearing those Hawaiian shirts? We're going to find out right now with my guest. Let's pull up the feed now. Cassie Miller, Senior Research Analyst at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I came across your article for Hate Watch, breaking down the Boogaloo Boys, and I wanted to have you on because obviously I'm a big fan of Hate Watch. I have Michael Hayden on the show often, and it's nice actually to have someone who isn't Michael Hayden on the show from Hate Watch. So thank you again for joining us. And, I wanted to get into this because I feel like we hear so much about, thanks to, the President of the United States and other loud voices, talking about Antifa and how the Antifa protesters, or as they like to call them, Antifa terrorists, are, going to these protests, these Black Lives Matter protests all over the country, these local protests, some in big cities, some in, the suburbs. It's been amazing to see this spread. But you hear all this stuff about Antifa coming to cause violence, to, these outside agitators, these, anti-fascist outside agitators. Amazing to put those words together. Can't have the anti-fascists come to town, right? But anyway, you hear all about Antifa, but barely really anything about the Boogaloo Boys. Can you tell us who the Boogaloo Boys are?
Yeah, I think the Boogaloo Boys are also trying to figure out who they are a little bit at this point. For the most part, it is an online subculture. It's mostly based in Facebook, and they're united by a few things. And I guess those are that they're pretty right-leaning, that they love guns, and that they believe that they're going to be part of an armed insurrection against the government. So the Boogaloo itself refers to this armed insurrection or sometimes a civil war, or in more extreme circles, it can mean an actual race war. So what we're seeing now is that these guys who have mostly hung around on Facebook and talked about, what weapons they own, their tactical gear, how to build weaponry, attacking cops who they have really special animus for. Now we're seeing them kind of come into like IRL organizing, and they're on the ground at a bunch of these rallies. And some of them are claiming to have some solidarity with the protesters who are out there after the murder of George Floyd. That's questionable how much of that, solidarity is really sincere. So it's kind of a confusing movement because some of them claim to have solidarity with Black Lives Matter, and then some are pretty overtly racist. They really want to portray themselves.
Hard to have that solidarity when you're overtly racist.
Right. And what they want to do is portray themselves as a liberty movement, I think, most broadly. And I think the question is, liberty for whom? Because there is a lot of racist content on their pages, and they don't seem to have, an actual lot of solidarity when you look at what they're doing on the ground.
Right. So, I wanted to give that sort of background up front so people can even know why we're bringing up the Boogaloo Boys right now at this moment in history. But now that we got that down, just, their presence at Black Lives Matter, and before we get too deep into that, let's rewind and let's go back to what this movement, even started as. Where did it begin? What is the founding of this Boogaloo movement?
Well, it goes back to like early 2010s internet culture. And the term Boogaloo emerged kind of concurrently in two far right spaces. So, both in the anti government movement and in the white power movement. And in the anti government movement, this is something that's really kind of defined by conspiracy theories. The main animating one is that the government is intent on disarming the citizenry, maybe putting people in FEMA camps, and that they're going to eventually, create a totalitarian one world government. So these are people who are really worried about things like gun confiscation. And in those contexts, the Boogaloo emerged in a 4chan board called K, which is really a weapons board. And it's not necessarily overtly white nationalist. In fact, they try to kind of not talk about politics very much. But when you're on 4chan, it's not, it's hard to not overlap with Pol, which is, an extremely racist kind of free for all. And what we're seeing is that kind of bleeds over into the culture of K. And so that's the first place we see it. And they're kind of refer specifically to a civil war. And it's kind of it's related to the anti-government movement's kind of worry about the moment, when shit hits the fan. That's something that they talk about a lot. So, right, when society collapses, we need to be prepared. And so for them, that's what the Boogaloo is, that, shit's hitting the fan. We've got to be ready for the Civil War coming. But it's also, emerged in these white power spaces online. So places like Pol, and even some as extreme as Iron March, which was a forum that was online from 2011 to 2017. And that was kind of really like the heart of fascism on the internet, and where you get the kind of burgeoning accelerationist movement. And these are the people who believe that in order for, neo-Nazis and white nationalists to ever come to power, they need to bring society to collapse. And then in that sort of power vacuum, they'll eventually come to power. So what they want to do is kind of actively push the state towards collapse. And for them, that's the Boogaloo. And so what we have is that it's in these two contexts, there's kind of always racist undertones. And those things have sort of followed through into how we think about the Boogaloo today.
So why the term Boogaloo, though?
It refers to a 1984 movie called Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, which was, I guess, notoriously terrible. I've never seen it. But it got picked up, as things do in far-right internet culture, and turned into Civil War II Electric Boogaloo. So that was kind of like how it was first framed.
All right. I mean, when meme culture is all you pretty much know, I mean, that guides your every single move, then I guess, the best way to explain a second Civil War would be to find a movie sequel that uses the number 2 in it. I mean, right? I mean, that seems to be the gist.
There's some sort of internal logic out of
it. So it seems like the movement's pretty, it's not very organized. It's sort of anyone who wants to consider themselves to be a Boogaloo boy can just claim to be a Boogaloo boy, like a lot of decentralized movements. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a formalized group. I think they, even to call them a movement, I think is to give them a little too much credit. I think it's a little more incoherent than that. And they're trying to kind of figure out their own boundaries. So, the one thing that unites them is this idea that there's going to be a civil war, and that they are the ones who are going to be prepared for it, and that they're going to be the ones to put things in order and take control. And then the other stuff that unites them are, it's an aesthetic in some ways. It's like a brand. So they have Boogaloo insignias. They have their Hawaiian shirts, which they wear because they've taken Boogaloo and turned it into Big Luau. So you have to wear a Hawaiian shirt. They also sometimes...
Naturally. Right. I mean, that makes sense.
They sometimes call it the Big Igloo. So they also have a flag. That's like an American flag, but instead of the stars, you have a big igloo, and then one of the stripes is a Hawaiian stripe. So these are kind of the things that define them and how you can pick them out in all of these rallies.
So it seems like this is really just, what you have here are, I'm assuming most of them are young, 20s, early 30s maybe.
It's like I would overwhelmingly white men, probably in their 20s and 30s.
Right. So it seems like you have a case here where you have. I'm assuming they also, most of them. I know we mentioned earlier, and we'll get more into this in a minute. That the solidarity of Black Lives Matter. But I'm assuming the ideology here among the Boogaloo movement is pretty far right.
It seems to be that way.
So you really have what is basically a group of, not even a group, individual young white conservatives who are basically looking for an identity, and this meme just popped up in their where they congregate in their 4chan and other forums, and some of them just sort of latched onto this as the cool thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a meme that basically turned into a subculture.
Right, because even even the alt right, had when they were big and they seemingly were in the eye of everyone who was paying attention to this sort of stuff. They had arguments over who really is alt right. Like there was an official alt right group. I mean, Richard Spencer has his website is altright.com, and pretty much he seemed to have sort of carried the banner for the official alt right, and that sort of created arguments online and in their little their little communities about who really was alt right. But there is nothing like that for Boogaloo.
There's a pretty big lack of coherence. I mean, the ideology that underpins them, though, is far right and racist. And so it's hard to imagine them existing, in any other kind of ideological landscape, really. As much as they might try to claim any kind of solidarity with leftists or with Black Lives Matter protesters, this is very much an idea that has permeated the entirety of the far right, and that's what they grew out of.
Right. So where have they been since? Now you said this is a movement. At least not really a movement. Like you mentioned, it's barely a movement, but people started identifying as Boogaloo, in the 2010s. Where and they, now all of a sudden I feel like in the past month, you've been hearing about them. The media is finally covering them. They're showing up at Black Lives Matter protests. But going back, what have they been making them? Where have they been making their presence known? Where when did they start coming offline and actually saying, "This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna wear these Hawaiian shirts in public," and what sort of protests or events were they attending, if they even were attending anything before this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first time that we really started to see them kind of enter the real world was in early 2020. So after they were on places like K, they migrated to Facebook. And Facebook has a long history of allowing extremists to use their platform and to stay on their platform even while violating their own terms of service. So you have a lot of people.
No
moving
way,
on
Facebook doing that? No, I can't believe no.
Surprising.
No, but Mark Zuckerberg seems like such a good guy. What's going on here? You gotta be kidding me.
spend my days yelling at Facebook.
What's amazing, and not to go completely off the rails here, but I saw this today and I have to bring it up. They finally got around to suspending like 100 or 200, white supremacist profiles and pages. And apparently, while doing that, they also suspended a couple dozen, if not more, I think it was something like maybe even 100, profiles belonging to non-racist skinheads, people in the rude boy ska movement. They suspended one of the frontmen from the Specials, who is a black man, because he identifies with rude boy culture, with overlaps with skinhead culture. I bet he was in some like sharp Facebook groups or something like that. Amazing. Even when they do decide to do something, they can't even do it right. I have to go too off the rails
I heard that. Yeah, no, I mean, and actually, it's funny because I heard that, and I was thinking about how, we've been writing stuff about the Boogaloo Boys and so many other outlets have, and telling them like, hey, they're violating your terms of service. Here's all these examples of them advocating for violence. And we haven't gotten any movement really at all. And one of the things that they told a lot of reporters when they asked, why haven't you done anything about this, is that Boogaloo is actually a kind of music. It's Latin music. And so if we remove Boogaloo groups, like we might end up removing music groups that we didn't intend to. And that sounds absurd because this is one of the largest social media companies in the world. Like surely they could figure out the distinction between the two, but apparently they can't because today they screwed that up so badly.
Right.
So who knows?
Right. I mean, it seems like you could pick it up from someone saying "Seek Hail." You know what I mean? So, but apparently they couldn't. Incredible. All right,
Yeah.
let's get back to the Boogaloo. So Facebook. I think we were talking Facebook. They were congregating on Facebook, and they were mostly sort of gathering in these sort of groups and pages.
Right.
So where did they start to get offline and actually, make themselves known in real life?
So the first
IRL.
the first kind of IRL place that they really kind of announced themselves was at a gun rights rally in Richmond, Virginia, on January 20th, 2020. So Richmond has tried to pass a lot of gun safety legislation, and they have successfully passed it since. And this caused a big commotion within the gun rights community and within militias and the anti-government movement more broadly. And so what you got was thousands and thousands of members of the right, of militias, and some Boogaloo boys who went out on the ground that day to protest. And that was the first time we kind of saw actual Boogaloo boy insignia on the ground. So people with tactical gear, with vests, with a Boogaloo patch with Pepe on it. And so part of that was like to make their announcement to protest this gun safety legislation. But also for a lot of them, they were thinking that this could be the thing to like actually set off the Boog. What they want is for the Boogaloo to happen. And they're looking for some sort of societal discord that they can use to set it off. And so for them, this was a place where that might happen.
You can tell they're noobs to political activism when they think a single event is about to be the jump off. Because I could tell you from my my experience as a leftist, you're gonna need to be doing this for a long time, buddies. If you're gonna it takes a lot to move the needle, even a smidgen. So to think that this one event was gonna be the jump off, I mean, move there, guys.
Yeah, they're very slowly learning. It's been interesting to watch their Facebook pages and watch them try to organize themselves, and clearly none of them have any background in organizing. And so it's a lot of people asking like, hey, I'm in Virginia. Is anyone in my area? And then everyone else just calls them a Fed, and it goes nowhere. So,
right. Well, they do have that in common with the left, to be honest with you.
That's true.
Now, who are some of the, because you bring up the gun rights, obviously gun rights appears to be the base of what this whole movement is constructed on. And I keep saying movement, you know what I mean. What
it's hard
little
not to
of a
use that
movement,
word,
yeah. What little of a movement there is, it seems to be the base of what the Boogaloo Boys are. And I was reading your piece, and a name came up that is very familiar with me because I remember when this went down, just thinking how ridiculous this is. Period. And then the fact that you would die over this, and who I'm talking about is, I believe his name, Lavoy Finicum. Mm-hmm. He was one of the militia guys who was with the Bundy boys. The family that pulled their guns on the feds for not paying their rancher fees, their land right fees, when they occupied. What was it that they occupied again? Like a
The
park.
nature reserve.
Right. They occupied a
Mhm.
nature reserve, which again, the idea that that's the hill you're gonna literally die on is fantastic to me, incredible. So they occupied this nature reserve. They finally come out. Lavoy Finicum is one who didn't put down his guns. I remember he wanted to fight for this nature reserve, and he ended up
Mhm.
getting killed by the feds.
Yeah,
Uh,
he hit a roadblock and reached for his gun, and so he was killed. And he's since become this really big martyr figure within the anti-government movement. And the Boogaloo Boys have kind of adopted him as their own. They have a whole kind of list of martyrs. They're engaging in, some kind of myth making here that there's been this long running battle between these patriots and law enforcement. And so they have on their flag, they have one that lists all the people they consider kind of their martyrs. And Lavoy Finicum is on there. Vicki Weaver is on there, who was killed in an FBI shootout in Ruby Ridge in 1992, which is another kind of major moment within the anti-government movement. And then they have more recent people that they put on there, like a man named Duncan Lemp, who was killed in March. He was 21. He was in Maryland, and he was killed during a no-knock raid. So the cops thought that he might have some illegal firearms. And so it's unclear exactly what happened. The cops said that he had his room booby trapped. His parents say he was actually just killed in his bed. But this became a huge, huge thing within the Boogaloo movement. And he became kind of their like defining martyr. And he probably more than anyone else has probably kind of helped to define what the Boogaloo movement is. And so after that, you got a lot of groups on Facebook and stuff called like We Are Duncan Lemp. Or if reporters would ask the Boogaloo Boys what their names were, they would say Duncan Lemp. So it gave them a person to orient themselves towards and to kind of seek revenge for his unjustified death.
right. And he was someone who identified with Boogaloo, right?
He did.
Right. So you have someone who, I mean, that's I mean, you can't get any more, perfect for them to hold, someone more perfect to hold up as a martyr than that. I mean, this is such a young thing that they've got going on here. And right away they have someone who identifies with them getting killed. I mean, it seems like
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty strong jump off for them.
Yeah, yeah. And it really, I mean, I think it helps solidify things at a really crucial time because he was killed right around the time that the coronavirus was hitting. And so what we saw is they're becoming galvanized around this one thing. And then we have this huge global disruption that is upending literally everything in everyone's lives. And to them, that looks like another thing that might be able to set off the Boogaloo, that there might be all this societal unrest because there's just so much uncertainty. And so they really, really start to kind of organize around that. The Tech Transparency Project did a really good report where they looked at these Boogaloo groups on Facebook, and they put it out at the end of April, and they found that there were over 125 of these groups, and that 60% of them had been formed in the last 3 months. So during the time that Duncan Lemp was killed, and then when the coronavirus was hitting and things were starting to get locked down. So these are really kind of the big galvanizing events for the movement or
So what?
subculture.
Now, right now, I did an episode on specifically how white supremacists were using the coronavirus to basically build a brand off of. There's actually one white supremacist who has built a very successful coronavirus podcast where a daily podcast where he was updating people on coronavirus happenings and news, not being upfront that what he was, a white supremacist, but obviously if you're doing a show like that, you're obviously using that to spread your ideology without being upfront about doing it. Were the Boogaloo Boys? Well, you just said they were. How were the Boogaloo Boys using the coronavirus. Did they go down to some of these lockdown protests when the conservatives and militia groups started to, rally and cry that they need to open up because their hair was getting a bit too long?
Yes, the Boogaloo boys were there with the ladies who wanted to get their hair cut. They were out there with their insignias. We saw a lot of them handing out flyers. I think for them, it was this moment of uncertainty, and they realized also that there was probably a receptive audience on the ground who would be pretty sympathetic to what they had to say and would probably agree with a lot of their anti-government ideas. And I think, being out on the ground lent them a few things like media attention. I mean, obviously, we know really this was a really small movement of people. I think only like 10% of people actually were in favor of opening things up in order to, help the economy. But there was just a huge amount of media attention on these rallies. And so that was a way of kind of projecting themselves into a larger space. But also, that being on the ground and just meeting other people creates a huge sense of camaraderie. And it's a way for people to connect and recruit people. And we've seen this over and over again in the far right, that on the ground organizing plays a big role for them because it actually helps to create networks that are localized, because so much of their organizing is really online. That's useful to some extent, but the on the ground stuff is to them too.
Now, I'm not sure if you could answer this because I don't know if the any analyzing of this has been done, but is there an overlap between people who are identifying as Boogaloo now and people who identified as part of other right-wing subcultures? Now, obviously, most of these people are right-wing, but I'm talking about specific subcultures. Like, are there people who consider themselves to be alt-right that are now Boogaloo? 3%ers that now consider themselves Boogaloo. Proud Boys who now consider them Boogaloo. Do we know if there is an overlap there, or if these are just the latest the latest brainwashed young white men who get fall down the YouTube rabbit hole?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, it's hard to tell at this point. I think that a lot of them are coming from, racist far right subcultures. So, there's some Boogaloo groups on Facebook that make reference to Rhodesia in their group name. And, Rhodesia holds a special place in the heart of white supremacists.
Right. I mean, if you're new to this, if you're just some, lonely white kid stuck home with no friends during the pandemic, you're not referencing Rhodesia until you get deep into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Dylan Roof, we know, who killed 9 parishioners in a church in Charleston, talked about Rhodesia. So that was an important marker for him. So it's a really important point within the white nationalist movement. So probably you're not going to be throwing that around unless you have some familiarity with that subculture.
Right. So let's talk about the Black Lives Matter protests and the Boogaloo presence there. Now, one interesting thing that I think I want to start off talking about is you make mention actually that within the Boogaloo movement there was at least online in at least one random Facebook group that identifies with the movement, there were people sharing memes basically praising John Brown. Now that's that's interesting. That's certainly something that you don't usually see in a far right movement.
Yeah, I mean, they're idolizing someone who I guess engaged in armed insurrection. And, there is some praise of Black Lives Matter. They do talk about some of, the Black people who have been killed over the years and express frustration and anger over that. But that's sort of minor, I think, in comparison to a lot of the other content, which is more focused on kind of building that armed insurrection. So talking about murdering ATF agents or killing cops or, Just before we got on here, I was just looking at some Boogaloo groups, and there was a meme about making napalm. So, in some ways, there's so much going on where there's like people who want to be anti-racist, there's extremely racist content, there's extremely violent content, and it's all mixing in there.
Right, and I bring that up because it actually, when I saw that, it reminded me specifically of something I experienced and something I encountered in the mid 2010s with the men's rights movement. I was debating Paul Elam of A Voice for Men, and I brought up how if you're a men's rights activist and you care about men so much, then why doesn't the men's rights movement care about police brutality against black men? Why don't they care about what happens to black men in this country? And he, along with a lot of people who were watching in the chat, wanted to point out that that was a racial issue, not a men's rights issue. And that stuck with me whenever I see something like this, because here they are talking about John Brown. Now John Brown was a white guy, but what he did was he killed people to help free slaves. And I feel like it reminded me of that, in terms of they look at John Brown and they don't even see that what he was doing was to free black people from the chains of slavery. They look at him as just, oh cool, a guy killing cops.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the right interpretation, and I think there is an inability to think about how black people and black men in particular have been targeted by the police in this country. I mean, it's obviously something we know that's been documented over and over again, often captured on camera for us now, but they just don't identify in the same way. So,
Right.
Duncan Lemp was killed when there was a no-knock raid, but so was Breonna Taylor.
Right.
And, Duncan Lemp has galvanized them, and Breonna Taylor doesn't get nearly as much mention from them.
Well, Breonna Taylor wasn't wearing one of those Pepe and the Hawaiian shirt patches.
That
So,
is true.
I mean, it is, that really seems to be, what I mean, I get it. I mean, I get why they're, you have a young white guy who literally was part of their little group who got killed, but still, if they want, if they actually cared about what they pretend to, Breonna Taylor would mean just as much, probably. I mean, obviously to us more, because of what it means to what happened to her. It's a very different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's in your article you brought up something that happened in Minneapolis in 2015. Can you explain what and this was at another Black Lives Matter event. Can you explain what happened here?
Yeah, so we talked about K a little bit, the 4chan board, which was the weapons board, and that was actually a place where several men in Minnesota, 4 men in Minnesota, ended up meeting, and then ended up having a real life meetup not so long after that, and that was in 2015, and that was at the same time that a man named Jamar Clark was killed by the police in Minneapolis. And so there was, a number of protests in Minneapolis, and these men came and kind of stalked around and harassed people, and one of them ended up shooting several of the protesters. He shot 5 people. And so, in this place, this message board, which is the same place where the Boogaloo meme was kind of birthed, you also have several people who end up engaging in real life violence against Black Lives Matter protesters. And so I think it's pretty telling, and sort of prescient in some ways, about where the sympathies of, this movement lie.
Right. Right. I mean, you could, and I bring that up because obviously this all begins, the current state of things all begins in Minneapolis with, the police killing of George Floyd. And I mean, there's a video going around of, and I don't recall if this was in Minneapolis, but there is a video going around that's sort of going viral online where it's being framed as, like, oh, look, these, because it's a video of a guy in the Hawaiian shirt with the bulletproof vest over him, carrying a firearm, and he's picking up one of either rubber bullets or tear gas canisters that the police shot, and he's holding it up and he's saying, like, do you believe that this is what they're shooting at these peaceful protesters? And
right.
right, and it's being shared as, oh, look, even these gun-toting right-wingers are opening their eyes to this. And, it's clear to me, if to anyone at least who is familiar with how these movements work, is that, I mean, maybe we found the one guy who all of a sudden had the eye-opening experience. That's a possibility. Anything's possible. But more likely is you have someone who is using this to further his own agenda.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there are some people who I think actually are they're frustrated about police brutality, right? I mean, the militarization of the police and over-policing is really what's at play here. And not only has that contributed to the Black Lives Matter protests on the ground right now, but, it is something that has contributed to the growth of the Boogaloo Boys. I mean, it's something that they're paying attention to. And, if it weren't for the militarization of the police, what happened to Duncan Lemp might not have happened that way, because we wouldn't have been sending out a SWAT team to do a no-knock raid. So that is very much, I think, a part of this narrative. But I mean, for the most part, what we're seeing is that most of these Boogaloo Boys are basically trying to kind of leverage the protests to kind of put forth, their own kind of right-wing vision or use it to their own ends.
Right. Now, in Vegas, there were 3 people who identified with the Boogaloo movement who were arrested. I believe it was federal charges, and I believe it was conspiracy for destruction or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they were caught with Molotovs, and I feel like here you have something connected to this far right movement that we actually now see was part of the protests, and I wanna be clear here, because I hated the whole perception that a lot of political leaders, a lot of elected officials are putting forward that anyone who, or even just anyone, the majority of people engaging in violence at protests were outside agitators or part of a far left or far right movement. I mean, we know now. I knew when I heard it, but if you were someone who needed to wait for the stats, we know now that that's empirically false. The arrest records of number of cities have come out, and by and large, in each case, something like 85 to 90% of people who were arrested at these events were local protesters. So the idea that these protests are being led by anyone by Antifa super soldiers or Boogaloo Boys is bullshit. But we do know there is an element of Boogaloo there. And, that's why I think it's important to bring this up and talk about Boogaloo right now, because, while they may not be a force to reckon with during these protests, we can see that they're finding the openings. Now back to these Las Vegas guys. So they're arrested on federal charges, and I feel like it's sort of been, it was covered, but you don't really see anyone, when the president is going on about Antifa and far left anarchists, and you don't hear, obviously, it's not surprising with Trump, but, it's sort of like, hello?
Yeah. I mean, Antifa has become this insane boogeyman, obviously, and that's been a right-wing project for a long time now to, paint the left as the ones who are inherently violent, when we know very well that the far right has a monopoly on political violence in this country. But, and we know that there aren't outside agitators, that is a trope that is always kind of used at these moments to really delegitimize what is real frustration and real political protest. By saying that it's all due to outside agitators, you distract from the real issues that are leading people to get there on the ground. And so I don't think it's right to talk about the Boogaloo Boys as, infiltrators, or that they're trying to direct, or the movement in any way. What I think they're doing is they're basically trying to leverage it and use it kind of as a stage to carry out their own project. So they don't necessarily see themselves as a part of the protest. They're just trying to use the protest to create more civil unrest. A lot of them, those guys in Vegas in particular, expressed disappointment that the riots weren't violent enough. So the three guys in Vegas had several plans in place. They talked about destroying a substation, a power station, a ranger station. But then they also talked about bringing Molotov cocktails to a Black Lives Matter protest. And they got arrested when they had the materials to make those. So I think they're facing some state terrorism charges. So, what they were trying to do is use this as their stage to carry out, this right-wing vision that they have.
Right. Now, what is next for the Boogaloo Boys? What are they currently? I mean, obviously these protests are not going away, so I'm sure their presence will remain. But where are they congregating right now? Being that so many of their Facebook groups are being finally, with the spotlight being put on them, they are being, at least some of them are being suspended and taken down. Do they have how after white supremacists lost after the alt-right lost 4chan, they moved somewhere else. After some of these, they moved to 8chan. Where are the Boogaloo Boys currently sort of staging their growth efforts?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, they're really still on Facebook. I go check Facebook every day, and those, all the groups that I know of, they're still up. So I think that they're probably there to stay for a while, and they do, things they can to avoid bans, so they just remove Boogaloo from their name, and then the algorithm will catch them, and they'll get to stay on there. And because a lot of these are private groups, Facebook is way more hesitant to actually go and delete them. But, we see people migrate to other platforms all the time. So I assume and I hope that eventually Facebook would take these pages down, and then, what will likely happen is that you disrupt the network at least, and you have to give, then they have to kind of reorganize, but they might migrate to another platform. And, one where we see a lot of people moving to is Telegram lately, and that's kind of where we're seeing kind of the most overt calls for violence these days.
Right. I mean, Telegram is, when Milo got deplatformed everywhere, Milo Yiannopoulos, he moved to Telegram. Laura Loomer moved to Telegram. I mean, and those are the big names in the movement, the far right. So, it's not surprising that these guys would go there. So what are they, are they talking beyond the Black Lives Matter protests yet? What are they looking at?
I don't know that they're talking beyond it yet, because I think they're kind of stuck trying to figure out what their role is. And, for all the people saying hey, this is our moment to join this uprising, most people seem to be incredibly suspicious of the protesters and really, really uncomfortable with the idea of aligning with people who might be on the left, even if they, might both, find police brutality abhorrent. And so what we're seeing is that they're criticizing the protests and kind of painting them as illegitimate. And we're also seeing, a lot of racial commentary and racist commentary being made about the protesters. A lot of people calling the protesters joggers, which is now kind of basically a racist slur within a lot of these communities. Which they're using.
You could, the word formation is all there. I mean, they're just a few letters off.
Yes, because Ahmaud Arbery was killed while he was jogging, so now that's become their term of choice.
Didn't even think of that, but
Yes, so that's where it comes from. But I mean, there's this suspicion, and what they're doing is kind of aligning actually with business owners. I mean, the thing they seem most concerned about is private property. And so a lot of them, when they're on the ground, they're actually not joining in the protest. They're there to protect private property. And every video I've seen of what they actually look like when they're at these protests is they're not really joining in. I've never seen a Boogaloo boy, engage in any chants. They're always kind of standing off to the side, and they look like they're patrolling. And so that's kind of what they're doing now. And my concern is that they're going to try and kind of align themselves against Antifa, this boogeyman, because a lot of their talk is about, the communists and Antifa who are out on the ground. And we know that kind of rhetoric is everywhere. So I'm, curious and concerned to see where that goes.
I love the idea of this rebellious group of young white men looking to start a civil war, and what they're most concerned about is private property. Can't think of anything more lame, less rebellious, less revolutionary than private property. I mean, they're going to start marching for landlord rights next or something like that. I mean, unbelievable. Well, not surprising, because really that's what the conservative movement, one of the tent poles of conservative movement is all about. Private property. Cassie, after you broke this down, I have to say, I knew it before, but I can 110% say it now. The Boogaloo movement is lame as hell. A bunch of nerds and losers and dorks who...
So you're not going to put on a Hawaiian shirt now?
No, I wouldn't put on a Hawaiian shirt before all this. It sort of goes against my all black, all the time Antifa vibe. But that's my aesthetic. But yeah, no Pepe in an igloo patch for me. Cassie Miller, senior research analyst for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Where can people find you and follow you? And if you want to read Cassie's article, it's in the description of the show, on the YouTube live stream, and on the public Patreon page. Where else can they find your work, Cassie?
They can find me on the Hate Watch blog, or they can find me on Twitter at Cassie P. Miller.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Hope to have you on again soon in the near future.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
Well, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Some notes before we go into the second half of the show. So this past week and a half, I was on two different podcasts. I was on Jordan Yules and Rob. Oh my God, is it Rousseau? Sorry, Rob, if I fucked up your last name. Their podcast, The Insurgents, and we talked about the protests and the police reaction to the protests and the outside agitator trope. You could check that out. I've tweeted it out. You can go to my Twitter page at Matt Binder. I was also on the latest episode of Jared Holt's Shitpost podcast. And on that podcast, we also talked about the protests, but we focused more on the misinformation and conspiracy theories going on around that, with a big section on talking the busloads of Antifa going to small town USA. So check out both those podcasts. Jared has given me the thumbs up to post it to my own feed, so I'll be doing that a couple days after this podcast goes up, just to give it a little time, because it is Jared's show. I want him to get the views first, because I'm nice like that. If you were following me on Twitter at Matt Binder, you'll also be familiar with the fact that I was recently demonetized once again on YouTube for the same bullshit reason I was before, for their policy of reused content. Now, that policy is, if you're just taking other people's work and posting it as your own and not creating original content, then we do not want to monetize you. That's YouTube's policy. Well, as you guys know, on my YouTube page, youtube.com/MattBinder, it's literally all original content. It's live streams of me on camera, just like you're watching now, if you're watching on the YouTube live stream, and a guest talking about the topic of the episode. Took a few days, but YouTube realized that they were once again wrong for doing so, and I've been remonetized. So you can once again, if you're watching on the live stream, drop a super chat, give me a one-off donation. And, there'll be ads, and I'll get my pocket change from there, too. But, the live stream, when it comes to YouTube monetization, the live stream super chats is where I get the bulk of the money from. And when I say bulk, I mean, a cup of coffee or something like that, which I don't actually spend for a cup of coffee because I don't drink coffee. I save it up to get new equipment and upgrade that stuff, which, by the way, I'll have some new equipment in the works very soon, including a new webcam is on the way with a higher quality and probably, some other cool new stuff. Thanks to all you folks who support the show. And if you want to support the show via a monthly subscription, you could do so at patreon.com/mattbinder. I ask for $5 a month. You can give less, you can give more. What you get from that is A, supporting the show so I can continue doing it and growing the show. The show doesn't exist, the free show included, without the Patreon subscribers. But you also will get the audio version of the second half of the show, which we're about to go into in a minute. You could also follow me on Twitter at MattBinder. Ooh, I recently started promoting my Instagram a bit. Again, on Instagram, I am at MattBinder. Because I'm going to start posting more there because I realized that a lot of these young protesters are using Instagram to organize and spread their word and get people to protest. And I am now on there finally posting. So again, Twitter at MattBinder, Instagram at MattBinder, any other social media platform, search Matt Binder and you'll find me. And before we go to the second half of the show, I want to thank my Patron subscribers by name. Abigail T, Adam Q, Alan B, Amanda H, Andrew C, Andrew H, Angela, R.E.R, Baka, Ben, Benji, Bobby M, Brian S, Brosnan, Champagne Kami, Chris F, Christine H, Cindy G, Colin R, Connor R, Cracker Barrel, CT, Cyber Snowstorm, User D, Dan K, Dank Uger, Dave K, David Z, Daya, Douglas V, Dragon Slayer, Eugene B, Froz K, Free Hat, FTW All Day, Graham C, Greywind, Greg D, there's two Greg Ds, Greg D, and Greg D with two Gs, Grim L, Helmy, Hitesh, Igor, Jack D, Jacob W, Jameson, Janelle A, Jasmine H, Jeremy M, JLS, John B, John S, Jonathan B, Joseph H, Joseph R, Joyce M, Justin S, Katie S, Kaushal, Kyle, Lisa D, Mariah, Mark S, Maddie, Max W, me, Melissa M, Mitch, Michael B, Michael J, Michael M, Mr. Danks, NS, Nicole A, Namde Net, Null Style, Odeth, Paul M, Penelope D, Qster, Rad Dad, Remy, Ryan, Scott R, Seth K, Sean H, Sheena A, Silicone Baby, Stephen R, Stephen S, Steve Austin, well, Stone Cold, I guess, Tammy G, Hypervisor, This Is Not Pizza, Tina M, Tom M, Why That Tie Guy, Utopian, Zach M, and Zoe. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We are going to the second half of the show now. Everybody else, see you all next time on Doomed. What's up, Patron subscribers and live stream watchers? We are back. How are you all doing today? So yeah, the last show was, we didn't skip an episode because I'm gonna sort of going to be doing a bunch of episodes in the coming week or two, because what I'm planning out right now is to have a few different people running for office here in New York for the lead up to the New York primary election in 2 weeks. A little less than 2 weeks now. So I'm going to be talking to some people running for office. So we'll have a few extra episodes. So I'm sort of been plotting that out. And then on top of that, I did those 2 podcasts, The Insurgents and Shitpost. I've been doing some longer form articles. One coming out, I believe it'll publish tomorrow for Mashable, that I'm very excited to see go up, about the literal breaking up of communities that are that's happening around the country, like neighbors fighting neighbors over the Black Lives Matter protests in Facebook groups all across the country. So watch out for that piece. I so much going on that I had to push back the launch of that newsletter that I was telling you guys I was prepping, Misinfo, which I want to get back on that, but let me knock some of this stuff out, and then I'm going to get back onto the newsletter. Simply because it's good, obviously, to have you guys in one spot where I can shoot off updates and things like that. So yeah, lots going on, and I couldn't do it without you guys. I also am currently working on a long form. When I say long form, I mean, not a minute or two, but a couple of minutes long video for YouTube. It's not part of the podcast, the standalone video I've been telling you about, that breaks down the far right propaganda that's being spread by a particular police department in this country. I think you guys can guess who and what I'll be breaking down. But yeah, it'll certainly be interesting, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. And again, you patrons make it possible. Right. That's what's going on. So let's get to your comments and YouTube chatter. We got a few super chats from Renee. Thank you, Renee. How to fight the fash with community organizing. Ask if Jakarta... I missed this. Sorry, Renee. Ask if Jakarta comes up as a meme. Commie killing. It probably does. But I'm sorry I didn't see that when you sent that. But I mean, you could pretty much... If they do mention, global happenings, that's one of them they'll bring up. We got a Twitch user saying, "Yo, YouTube, can you see this?" Yes, YouTubers can see this. Thanks to the Restream multi-chat feature, where YouTube can see the Periscope chat, the Twitch chat. I believe the Facebook chatter too comes through. But again, my Facebook page is very small. I haven't really promoted it. So, I do think, though, if there's something there with the Facebook group stuff. If you guys are down in joining a Facebook group, I think that's definitely a spot where we should jump on. I'll start a Facebook group, and we'll... I know a lot of you are not on Facebook, but I think there's a real benefit to being on Facebook simply because so many other people are on Facebook, and you gotta... if we're gonna get through to people, if you're gonna get through to people, your shit needs to be shared, where those people who aren't in the know will see it. Zoe says only Periscope doesn't see Restream, right? But you see the Periscope. The other platforms don't go into the Periscope chat, but the Periscope chat does go into the YouTube feed. And Salami Mommy goes, who even uses Facebook? A lot of people, unfortunately. Oh, Zoe noticed that I cut and shaved. Well, I didn't shave, I trimmed. And yes, I had to get a haircut. It was getting too hot. You know, that's when I get the haircut. Just to, you know, just so the fresh hair comes in, the hair that's not like, you know, dead ends, bogged down on the back of my neck, making me sweat. You know what I mean? Like, you guys know what I'm talking about if you have long hair. It's when it's humid and hot, it's just gross. So you want, just a trim to get it freshened up, so that way you don't feel, greasy and sticky and gross. I mean, if I was gonna go with a shorter cut, I could have gone much shorter than this. Zoe says Civil War II electric boogaloo, right? Yeah. Shayna says it's the new fascist move to try to buddy up with the left to confront the corporate machine, then come after the left after the beast is dead. Well, I mean, they're not even waiting for that, obviously. But yes, that's a great, that's a great point. But they're not even waiting for that. Salami says, sorry, but if they want to be terrorists, they need to pick a less silly name. Zoe says, is the just going after the government only a new kind of rebranding? Because I remember people using the Boogaloo meme before, and they were explicitly pro-race war. No, that's definitely, I think we got to that, but it's definitely, a race war. Zoe asks, isn't 4chan as a whole not explicitly white nationalist apart from Pol? Well, I mean, there are other, 4chan boards that are, but yes, there are a lot that aren't. But I mean, I feel like you could probably find another platform to hang out on if you're that worried about that stuff. That's my opinion. Grim says, really hate how white nationalists have learned the word accelerationist. I used to only worry about what neo-reactionary Nick Land is up to. Zoe says it's Siege and Turner Diaries fantasies. Yeah, that's definitely. Right. Ryan says they're fucking nerds. Right. Right, they are. Grimm says accelerationism is used by some continental theorists as part of a post-Marxian desire to intensify capitalism so people will be more likely to see its contradictions and hasten its cold. Silicone says, I remember it being a meme in the mid-2000s. Yeah, I remember the meme. Salami says, so these guys are basically trying to continue that 90s kind of militaristic white supremacy. Yeah, I mean, even the aesthetic with the Hawaiian shirts, it's very 90s-esque. Lord Arion says, yes, there are left and right accelerationists. Yeah, but the left accelerationists aren't looking for a race war. They're just looking for shit to go down by like a Trump presidency. So that, when they, so people just wake up to, how everything is fucked up and they hit the streets. I mean, obviously, as you can see, that doesn't usually happen in that way. But, that's not the same for sure. So he says it's siege shit, but mired in internet and meme culture. Grimm says this is more Turner Diaries McVeigh style terrorist cells. Zoe says they were boogaloos at the armed protest in federal offices at the beginning of the quarantines, right? Yeah, we got to that later after Zoe said that. Yes. Lord Ariane says Hawaiian shirts and guns is like the CIA uniform. That's a great point. I feel like there is a whole that is like the cliche you see in movies, like the undercover federal agent in the Hawaiian shirt. Right. I mean, but they obviously wear their bulletproof vest under the shirt, not over the shirt like these guys. Because, I mean, then obviously that would sort of give up their whole undercover identity, right? But I mean, Ryan says, die mad Lavoy. Oh, wait, you already did. I mean, Mariah says, so the saw Amin Bundy get out of a cop car on the way to his trial on my way to class one day. Yeah, the whole Bundy thing was so ridiculously dumb. And the idea that you would fight and die for not wanting to pay your rancher fees. And the fact that they pulled guns on federal agents and not a single person died at that ranch showdown. No shot was fired. The feds stood down. Can you imagine if a bunch of black men and women pulled their guns on federal agents? What that shootout would have been like? And what the conservative reaction would be to that compared to the Bundy reaction? I mean, the Bundys were put on a pedestal as freedom fighters. There's a few videos of black people, breaking into a supermarket or a Target to get to take some stuff, and you have people talking about there's no more law and order, and these ruthless, lawless thugs are breaking down society. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, not unbelievable. I like using that word to basically just say fucking bullshit. Totally believable, but ridiculous all the same. Grim says, I wonder how many boogies are former Proud Boys. Yeah, I mean, I asked that, but I don't know. It feels a little bit different. Proud Boys really feel like they're in it for the, the frat boy atmosphere. And the Boogaloos seem like they might be a totally different subculture in terms of, I mean, the Proud Boys are the types that, chug beers and do stupid, frat boy pranks to each other to fuck with each other, and that dumbass shit they're into. The jock sort of aesthetic to it. Where honestly, these Boogaloos are really like just like a far right like nerd subculture. That's what it feels like, at least. So he says, ask them if they can jack off and list cereal brands. Right, that's the Proud Boys initiation and the shit they do. Right. I mean, it does feel different, though. I don't feel like they would do that. I mean, one punch to one of these guys, and they'd probably start, like, going, no, you're hurting me, stop. That's what it feels like, to be honest. That's my breakdown of that. Grim says, ain't cutting my hair till Trump's out of office. I mean, I had to get the haircut, man. Couldn't deal with the heat. Got a haircut at home, by the way. Wasn't one of those people protesting during the lockdown going, I need to get my hair cut. Not one of those. Although I did hit up a few protests since the last episode of the show. I went down to one in Flushing Main Street, stopped by at the one in Whitestone, and then went to a protest at Queens College that marched down a major street in Queens. The Whitestone. The Whitestone one. I don't think I mentioned it because I think the last episode before this happened. That Whitestone protest has been getting so much shit. Basically, a bunch of young kids in the area. Young kids. Maybe like when I say young kids, like teens, 20s, maybe early 30s, got together in the one, area of one of the few areas of Queens that are majority white population. One of Whitestone is, I believe, one of 5 that actually voted for Trump in 2016. And they've been getting together at this overpass for about a week now, in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. And at first, it was a small protest, maybe no more than a dozen or 2 dozen people. And this video went viral because this guy drives by screaming at them, you're in the wrong part of town, or something of that nature. It's on video. And they curse back at him. And at this point, the crowd has dwindled down to maybe no more than a dozen, if even that many. Maybe like 8 or 9. And he U-turns, pulls up next to them, and runs out with this weird, like, sci-fi weapon. That's like these 4, like, knives or claw-looking things wrapped around his arm, like attached to his hand. And he starts chasing the protesters, screaming, like, he starts screaming that you want to throw shit at me, I'll kill you. And if you look in the video, there's nothing there in the in the street. There's nothing that was thrown at him, and he's screaming that at them. And so they're videoing and running away from him. And so he gets in his car and he drives off once again, but does a second U-turn and then pulls up on the sidewalk and chases them off the sidewalk, like trying to run them over. And luckily, they all ran away and he didn't hit anyone. But, like, that's crazy. And it went viral. And the fact that this was in, small town in Queens that many people don't know about. When people think Queens, they think Flushing Main Street with, with Chinatown, or they think Astoria or Long Island City. They think the major parts of Queens. And, the fact that Whitestone became like this national news was crazy for me, at least, as a lifelong Queens resident. And the guy wasn't arrested for a few days, and he turned himself in. And at first, they just charged him with, like, menacing and things like that. And he got off. And then because of public outcry, they then went to his home and arrested him again, this time without him turning himself in. Like, them actually going, the police actually went to him. And I can't remember what exactly it was. I think, let me, because I want to know exactly what they charged him with. They charged him with attempted murder in the 2nd degree now. So they upped those charges. And, I mean, I found the guy's Facebook page. And he is a Trump supporter, no surprise there, who lives in the area, no surprise there, who had many posts talking about how he's got his guns, that if people want to fuck around, he's ready to defend the Constitution. And he's just like, post after post, like, pumping himself up for, like, the protesters to do something. But they didn't do anything. And in a lot of these, and again, this article is coming out tomorrow, and it's not just Whitestone. It's happening all over the country. Facebook groups are literally tearing families, communities, I should say, apart in suburbs all across the country, because there are people who are believing this Antifa super soldiers being bussed in by George Soros, who's paying them into all these small towns because they want to commit violent acts in small town America. I don't know what they think they're going to loot in small town America, but that's the belief. And so you have these local kids, local people having these protests in their town in solidarity with the bigger Black Lives Matter protests. And their own neighbors are pointing at them going, oh, who are these fucking outside agitators? They don't live here. When literally they live right next door. So, it's crazy. It is crazy that this is what's happening. And again, when I say crazy, I mean, nothing is shocking to me anymore, but it still makes it insane. Doesn't make it not insane just because I'm not surprised it would happen. Right. So, right. Back to the comments. Grim on the Boogaloo solidarity, quote unquote, with Black Lives Matter. do not believe it's sincere. Right, obviously. It's bullshit. Miss Heathen plugs her Instagram account, Antifa.general. Again, Matt Binder on Instagram. If you're listening, follow me on there. I'm really gonna start using it more. I promise. I swear. I've actually posted there a few times in the past week. So definitely follow me there. Ooh, I'm one person away from 200 followers. That's what I get for being late to the Instagram thing. Got something like 40-something thousand followers on Twitter. Something like 50,000 followers on the old public shaming Tumblr. And I completely, a couple thousand on YouTube. And I completely blew it with getting on Instagram. Womp womp. My bad. Penelope with the super chat. Matt, you cut off your beautiful curls. Ugh, please don't mention my curls. I don't like my curly hair. I like that. I like slightly wavy, but I don't want to curl. That's part of why I don't like it, because it like curls up on me, and nah. I just want like nice long, slightly wavy but straight hair. That's what I want. Renee says helicopter memes and Pinochet did no wrong is more MAGA than bring up the Jakarta thing. Right. Yeah. Daniel says Minnesota goes back to as far as the Dakota 38. You know what? That sounds familiar. But 1862. Okay. "38 Dakota men were hanged. Largest one-day mass execution in American history. In Minnesota, Dakota." Huh. Zoe asks, is it police militarization they're against those Boogaloos, or just the fact it happened to one of their guys? I mean, I'm sure yeah, that's a great point. Like, I'm sure there are guys who don't like the militarization part of it. If you're actually, in that subsection of the right-wing movement. But no, I think you're right, too. Right. Zoe says, I don't think they want to kill cops. They want to kill people of color and other marginalized people. And if the cops try and stop them, they'll kill them too. Yeah. There is that anti-authoritarian aspect to some of them. But yeah, a lot of them are definitely not. That's definitely the case for a lot of them. Right. Yeah, the igloo, big igloo and big luau shit is so stupid, right? Right. Miss Heathen, bullshit excuse. The far right doesn't care about protecting property. It's an excuse to shoot Antifa folk and black kids they don't like, so it's gross. I don't know. These guys really do have like a fetishization of private property rights, to be quite honest with you. I mean, there's a lot of overlap with libertarians in this. Google's racist says the Confederacy was also worried about private property. Well, I mean, they actually were also worried about private property. Oh, you are making that point. Okay. Right. Right. I mean, slaves were their private property, right? Shayna says, speaking of the Confederacy, they tore down the Civil War monument in Portsmouth today during the protest here. Nice. Ryan says, I want to see Matt in that Coke Fail Sons Hawaiian shirt that MR has. Wyatt Coke, right. I wore that on the day we got the news that one of the Koch brothers died. Right, I remember that. And I was on the majority port. So I wore the shirt in memory. Right. Miss Heathen says, defund the police. Yep. Ryan says, hell yeah, Brother Stone Cold is a comrade. Right. There is someone named Steve Austin who is a Patreon subscriber. I appreciate it. Texas Rattlesnake, excuse me. Silicon Baby says Bernie's statement was disappointing. Yeah, I mean, what do you expect? What is he going to do? What's he going to say? I wasn't expecting. I mean, he is for pretty big reforms. I'm in the crowd where, the reforms aren't enough at this point. We know. I mean, police absolutely should not be using rubber bullets and tear gas anymore. The police should absolutely be demilitarized. But I mean, the cop who killed George Floyd wasn't in his army gear, wasn't in his military fatigues. The cop who killed George Floyd wasn't shooting tear gas or rubber bullets. The cop who killed Eric Garner wasn't wearing his military fatigues. He wasn't, driving a tank down the street. So, yeah, it's good that protesters won't lose their eyes or get brain damage when tear gas hits them in the head or the face. Hopefully that does happen, that we no longer have cops shooting those things at people. But again, it's not enough. It's not enough. So yeah, be disappointed in Bernie, but don't be surprised. My dad says MR had a guest on Tuesday to talk about the Jakarta thing. I need to look more into this. And first of all, the majority report, get into that before me, is unacceptable. Unacceptable. But, okay. The Jakarta Method, Washington's anti-communist crusade, and the mass murder program that shaped our world. I'll have to look into this. Renee says Bernie was just a last chance before the pitchforks. Miss Heathen says Bernie was our compromise and the ruling establishment said fuck you. Kevin K says the left has moved past Bernie. Bernie's an ally still, though. Don't move. Like we obviously knew he was always the compromise, but don't, and definitely criticize him and push him. But I don't think he's done anything to, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think he's done anything to warrant disassociation with. He's just, an ally. Ryan says, Matt, if you do a Facebook group, I'll join. I got back on it because of another podcast already, so why not? Yeah, let's do the Facebook group, because I think that's the way to grow things and share. I mean, obviously the Discord will still be open for the Patreon subscribers. Note, if you're a Patreon subscriber, I announced the show first in the Discord group, so you get that benefit too. And I do, I always seem to be more active in the Discord, but it's hard because this audience doesn't seem to be as active in the Discord either. There are a few of you who do talk in there, but so the Discord will remain as the private club for patrons. But yeah, I think there should be a Facebook group to publicly get stuff out there. And when I say stuff out there, I don't just mean this show. This is not going to be just a self-promotion effort. This is going to be a way to spread, leftist and progressive ideals, even signal boost other leftist YouTubers and podcasters and articles and news stories, debunking of misinformation, the great journalists out there who put a spotlight on far-right movements, to promote leftist electoral candidates. I think that's the way to do it, through a group, and we continue doing all the other stuff where we've done that stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna start the group. I'll post it in the Patreon, the Discord, all that fun stuff, and we'll do that for sure. Thank you, Ryan. Your one comment gave me the kick in the pants to know that at least one other person was on board. Grim says, I shaved my face, but I ain't cutting my hair until Trump is out of office. Aha. See, I trimmed my facial hair, but I am not shaving it. So we're just doing the opposite. The dog walker guy says, good day from Australia. Good day to you, dog walker guy. Miss Heathen says, Matt, you and Bad and Pinata should team up on a show. Yeah, I'd be down with that. Who's Bad and Pinata? The name sounds familiar. Yeah, I know the Bad and Pinata. On YouTube, right. Yeah, I'd be down with that. I mean, his YouTube channel is a bit bigger than mine, but about 10 times bigger than mine. But, I'd be down. For sure. Again, I forgot to, do the other stuff in terms of, but again, if you want to see me on other shows, if you want other shows, hosts to come on here, reach out to them too. Reach out to them too, for sure. Tell them you want to see me on their show or them on this show. For sure. Grim says, I don't think Matt's hair was long enough for a hair tie. It gets that long every now and then. It was, by the way, long enough. I don't look particularly... I'm not a hair tie guy. I need the bangs. I need the swoosh. Even when I shave the sides for my downed mohawk, you need to swoosh it. Maybe that'll be what I do this summer. That'll be my next hairstyle. Just shave the sides, keep the middle growing long. I've done that before. You guys have seen it. Kevin says, in Colorado, almost had a Boogaloo attack. Upstate Raider says, narratives more difficult for the establishment. I called out the police and media. I'm not sure what Upstate Raider's referring to here. Dude Man says, man, times are scary right now. Things have never been so uncertain in our lifetimes. It's so difficult to stay motivated. Listen, and we're just talking about Black Lives Matter protests, the unrest, the far-right movements. I mean, we did mention coronavirus. I think this show might be one of the shows to consistently make sure the coronavirus has been a subject in everything I've discussed for the past 3 months, whether the show was focused on coronavirus, which we did a lot of shows on that, or whether it was shows where, coronavirus was, hovering in the background. I mean, it's incredible how people think we were just moving on. The coronavirus is getting worse in a lot of parts of this country. I think this is gonna get even, the protests that are in the forefront right now, coronavirus isn't gone. I can tell you guys that. Even as on Monday, New York City started phase 1 reopening. I mean, New York City may be curtailing it, but rest of the country ain't doing so hot. And I'm sure there'll be another peak, another resurgence in New York City too. States reopen too soon. They just reopened too soon. It's that simple. Dinah says, has any reporting managed to trace billionaire money feeding these groups? Russian money? I mean, there's no money in it, really, to be honest with you. So, I mean, there would I don't know about the Russia thing, but is there far right, is there money being put into far right movements? Yes. Is there money being put into Boogaloo? I don't know, but these guys don't really have any funds. They're not really traveling or anything that far. Or when they do travel, it's just, car trips or whatever. Nothing that really needs all that much more money than a couple, tanks of gas, really. Upstate says the haircut looks good. Why, thank you. Renee saw my tweets from the Queens College protest. My pop says the Whitestone dude is in police custody. Oh, he's still right. Because they charged him with, but at first he wasn't. Okay, people were calling him Whitestone Wolverine, which, I mean, makes him sound cool, so I'm not going to call him that. Google's racist as the NRA is pushing the Antifa invasion for gun sales. All right, that 75-year-old man, Martin Gugino, who got pushed by Buffalo PD and cracked his head open. My God, that video is sick. And they tried to spin it at first. They tried to say that he tripped and fell during a skirmish when there's video of him walking over to the police, handing them a one of their riot helmets that they dropped. And they push him and he falls and cracks his head open. Unbelievable. And again, not unbelievable. Completely believable. But crazy nonetheless. 3%er, will you be voting for Trump? Yes, of course. Of course, you know me. Zoe says, holy shit, we got a 3%er. Oh yeah, the Seattle autonomous zones. Those are pretty cool. In Seattle, there's been areas the protesters have taken over, including a police precinct that the cops abandoned. And they've basically made a 24/7 like protest and arts community. That encompasses a few blocks in Seattle. Foxy T says, hi, I clicked 'cause you're cute, but I'm staying for the meaningful convo. Why, thank you, Foxy. The fact that you both, A, said something nice about my appearance, and B, because you said something nice about the content as well. I appreciate both. You should subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you should follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or wherever else you are on social media. Grim says, the cop who killed George Floyd may have had a contentious relationship with George since they both worked security at the same nightclub. George the door and the cop inside. Yes, I've seen that report. I want to hear more about it before we start talking more about that in terms of, because I've already seen people trying to spin it as, oh, see, it was a personal dispute. It has nothing to do with the cops, which, my God, if you don't see how that even adds an extra layer to the fact that he was a cop and was able to take out his personal vendetta using the badge, if that's the case, and get away with it pretty much until these protests, I mean, you're blind. Right, and as Zoe points out, the cop that killed Eric Garner did a banned chokehold and got away scot-free. Right, one of the special reforms that wonderful New York Governor Andrew Cuomo was pushing, that he's barring chokeholds. Well, in New York City, chokeholds have already been barred for like over a decade, and still Eric Garner was choked to death. Abby says the police released their investigation of Breonna Taylor today, and it came back with no injuries for her death. Weird, considering she was shot 8 times, right? If anyone is a Patron subscriber and you do not have the Discord invite, contact me. I don't know why the automated system isn't working, but please reach out to me. I'll get you the invite ASAP. My dad says, did you contact Sam Cedar yet? I am about going on Doomed. He said you spoke but never got back to finalize. Yes, I will get in touch with Sam to have him on this show. Upstate Raider says, my channel, Matt. What about your channel, Upstate Raider? I missed this conversation. Grim says, how can there be a second wave of coronavirus if the first wave never ends? Right. Upstate says, in my opinion, Memorial Day weekend, lots of people falsely got the impression things were safe. Well, here, a lot more people in New York City are going out now. But also, everyone is being very cautious. Most people wear masks. All the businesses that are open are totally down with the safety precautions. So, I mean, a lot of people being out in New York City, they are still being cautious, even with people out. But I know that elsewhere in the country, it's not the same. So he points out that the 75-year-old guy did trip after being violently shoved, right? Oh, I've seen this, right? Silicone Baby says, I know Q weirdos will believe a lot of crazy stuff. But the fact that they or anyone are willing to believe that the 75-year-old guy being pushed was a hoax, and the guy had a blood pack on the back of his head is beyond the pale. Right. The conspiracies about that are fucking insane. Oh, my pop says, Matt, you're missing some super chats. Let me make sure I don't miss those super chats. Dude, man, how do you get the courage to be a public figure? This is a super chat, by the way. With all the stuff going on right now, I've become anxious 24/7. How do you have the guts to do what you do? Ah, why, thank you, dude, man. That's very nice. I don't know if what I do is particularly brave, but I really do appreciate you thinking that, for sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of just using my name and making sure my opinion and I'm covering this stuff and it's all out there in the public. I don't know. I'm not really ashamed or embarrassed of anything because I know that I'm on the right side, I guess. Um, I mean, has it hurt my career prospects? I mean, luckily, the way my career trajectory went, I got into progressive media and leftist media and just, media that maybe even, more mainstream, but is sympathetic to that. Um, and I got in those crowds, and I guess I've been lucky in that aspect where it hasn't hurt my career so much. Although I probably am not making as much as I could if I chose to go another career path. I mean, I know I've probably been looked over for jobs when I would go out applying when I was looking for jobs because of my public figure persona, which is me, the real me. It's not a character I'm playing. But it's just I couldn't do it any other way. I couldn't sit there and see shit go on and not say something. I mean, I did this before my kids, so I can't even say, I just, so it's, I just couldn't do it for myself. But, having two kids, it's also like, I want them to live in a better world. So it just like, reinforces what I already think about doing this. I want everyone's kids to live in a better world. I don't know. I don't think what I do is that, I don't think I have an audience that's too big that I actually do. I don't. But for where I can push and where I can help, I couldn't just not do it. Champagne Comedy with another super chat says the guest Sam had on MR, Alex Vitale, had some great things to say on the end of policing. I think he has a book about it called The End of Policing. I'll check that out for sure. Renee says, I don't agree with the favoring of the social dems over tankies, but get on the serfs, the sweet nectar of the gods, Matt. I like the serfs, but for some reason, I noticed something weird with them. Whenever they refer to the majority port, and they name drop people on the majority port, and even, when I'm part of the conversation, it seems like they don't include me either. Now, I know I'm not a part of the majority port anymore, but I mean, I've been in some of those threads, and it's like, hey guys, what's going on? But yeah, I'd love to go on the surfs. I'd love to have on the surfs on this show too. Email them, message them, say you want to see Matt Binder on there. All right. The final comments of the day. Not Your Father's Corn Pop says, look at this guy and his haircut. Upstate says, my community, many are economically insecure. PPE is a luxury for many, right? I mean, yeah. Wade says, follow Matt on Instagram. Yes, please follow Matt on Instagram. If you're already following me on YouTube and Twitter, if you're not following me on YouTube and Twitter, follow me there too. But if you're already on there, Instagram, please. Let's see what I'm at there on Instagram, actually. Did I hit? Looks like I did. Hell yeah, over 200 followers on Instagram now. Working on up. Zoe says, oi, you could have been a contributor for on MSNBC, Matt. MSNBC, for Christ's sake. Well, actually, I was on MSNBC before. Dude Man says, you're a humble dude, Matt. Thanks. I don't know. I'm even humble. I guess I'm trying to even downplay that. I don't know. That's just how I feel. In terms of, I don't know. I'm stuck now because now I'm going to be humble about being humble. Oh, man. Matt Binder as a guest on The View, says Renee. Right. Grim says, let alone having shoe on head. What are you talking about, Grim? Grim says, I held back until Matt shared that personal anecdote, Renee. What personal? I'm so confused, Grim. What are you talking about? What do you mean, let alone having shoe on head and my personal anecdote? Champagne Kami says, I want a tanky girlfriend. Tyler says, open invite to come back on Political Fun Time Happy Hour Deluxe whenever it is convenient. Message me and for sure. We'll make it happen. I'm always open to going on anything. Grim says, surfs platform some trash people. Well. And Zoe says, let's not get into shoe on head. Has shoe on head? Oh, you're talking about literally that YouTuber shoe on head. Has she been on surfs? Listen, I would have shoe on head on this show, actually. I'm very interested in talking with her, to be honest. I would love to talk to shoe on head. To be quite frank. I would really like to talk to Shoe on Head. If I'm thinking about I'm reaching out. I haven't reached out yet. It's not like something I've actually thought about, but, yeah. I would definitely have Shoe on Head on this show. Because I am fascinated with that trajectory she went on. All right, folks. That is the show for today. Thank you all so much. We got some great shows coming up in the coming days. Stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Matt Binder on all of them. Stay tuned. Subscribe on Patreon if you're not already a Patreon subscriber. And that would be only people watching on the live stream right now. Other than that, see you all next time on Doomed.